Just one more example. When the governor sent down the last ArcLight
agreement, the deal,
debacle agreement, they were getting upset because of questions that the senators posed to the developers. They wanted a little bit more. Well, that's a good thing. Why would this legislature be on the side of the government and the governor be supporting the lime tree people? You would think that the legislature and the executive branch would work together and say, well, if the legislature wants more for the people, why isn't that a good thing? The executive branch now goes back to the table and says, well, they denied your first attempt. Here's what you can do to make this deal sweeter and to get us the Virgin Islands a better shake. Instead,
that's what you would like to see.
Exactly. Instead, you have the executive branch now defending the contract with the contractor. Who are they fighting against? Not the legislature. They're fighting against the people of the Virgin Islands. So those are the kind of things that we would like to really look at. And we're not always going to agree, but I think that we'll have a great working relationship.
I mean, theoretically, since you're coming out of the legislature, Senator, that should help.
Well, I would underscore exactly what Albert said, because you have to understand the function of each branch of government, and you have to have respect for it. You pointed an example there where the governor has said on more than one occasion, even if you override it, I'm not going to implement it. He said that. When we voted to increase the bond funding for GERS by $100 million, he said if the bonds were floated, he wasn't going to give the money to GERS. They could go pack a lunch. So it's impossible for you to believe that you can have a working relationship with people if you have no regard for their role and no respect for their positions. And there are at least 6 of the returning members of the legislature with whom I have worked. And one thing that I know every single person would say is that I am able to work with people. As a member of the minority, knowing that you need votes from the majority to pass any measure, whether we had a disagreement on some issue yesterday or the day before, I come to each person and I say, this is the idea that I have. Will you support it? That's how you regard people in a system of checks and balances. The governor goes around and makes this big production. He has signs with my face on his signs. And I have no, that I say no each time. Where are the checks and balances? I'm not supposed to be a yes man. When you come and say you're going to put a pipeline under the sea of St. Croix and it's going to be 2 miles, and you're going to allow tankers to come into that area with 5 million barrels of oil, and if there is an accident, you have to also get help from Puerto Rico. You have to wait for them to mobilize and come to St. Croix. You can't expect me to say yes to that with a half a day's hearing, no public input. So if you have respect for the role of the legislature, you're going to be successful in working with them.
We were talking about GRS a little while ago, and this is the opportunity for you to reiterate to folks what your plan is about. Now, I've heard you speak in several forums, Albert, and you said that your plan for shoring up the government employees' retirement system is 3-pronged. You're going to lower the unfunded liability, secure payments to retirees, and lower the cost of the retirement system to the government. You also had several objectives under that, and you identified 5 funding sources. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So the funding sources, I think, are the most important, and we didn't come up with this thing just like pie in the sky. We actually sat down with our team. We reviewed a lot of the studies that were done by the GRS over the years. We reviewed the studies from the task force that were submitted and came up with some things that we think were important, like you said. And the number one thing is to make sure that we don't reduce the annuity, the payment of people who are already retired. The further away from retirement you are, the longer you have to plan for it. So there's a lot of education piece in our in our plan as well too. But the 5 funding sources, the most impactful funding source are distilleries. And the reason being is because we get the rum cover over. So as we produce, we get all of that money back. We get 2 grabs at it. So adding a distillery is number 1 in terms of generating revenue. With a revenue of even $80 million a year, we would have enough money to finance a $600 million bond to the GRS system. There's 2 grabs at the rum cover of money. You get 1 grab because you actually sent the rum.
Right.
And then we split the rest of the rum that's produced by other islands besides Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. We get a piece of that too. So if Puerto Rico produces 60% of the rum that's sent, for instance, they get 60% of that extra money. Well, they've been doing the calculation wrong for years, so Treasury actually owes us probably $100 million. Getting that calculation and getting $100 million would also be a new source of revenue. They wouldn't have to pay it back to us immediately. They could pay it to us over time, but it would guarantee a new revenue source to either fund a bond or to put money into the system. Sports gaming is another one. We have this $120 million fiber optic cable that we invested in that really hasn't given us anything except better Netflix. So if we use sports gaming as a new opportunity for the Virgin Islands, we can then be able to get money that'll be designated for the GRS by having sports gaming companies in the Virgin Islands. The gasoline and the gasoline tax is something that we've been debating for years, and we were almost there at one point, but we couldn't come to an agreement, and we kind of lost that opportunity. We could still go back if we get the refinery pumping again. And then finally, I think the most impactful for the future earnings of the Virgin Islands would be our cannabis research and patent registry. So the cannabis industry in the United States is a $24 billion industry. By establishing a research center in our technology park, there are certain strains, oils, topicals, different things that they're extracting from this botanical now that can be patented. Every time that thing sells, that product, whatever it is, if it's an oil, every time it sells, the Virgin Islands would get a piece of that money from the patent. This is a huge opportunity for us because it's just like Viagra or McDonald's or Kentucky. Every time a piece of chicken sells, Colonel Sandals gets money. Why would they come to the Virgin Islands? Because we're not going to give them a 90% tax break. We're going to give them a 60% tax break. But that's a huge tax break anywhere else. And that the rest of all of that money that's generated from taxes would be another funding source for the GRS. The thing about our administration coming into office is about having the ability to come out and lead. Before we started talking about medical marijuana research, everybody else was quiet. The MAP administration had 4 years, they never commented on it. The same thing with the tuition bill.
But it's a touchy topic still for some people.
But even the GRS is a touchy. When we started talking about the GRS, people told us we were crazy to create a plan. If you're going to lead in anywhere and you're going to move people forward, you're going to have to take risks. The reason why they call it a vision is because only you can see it. Leadership is being able to convince a group of people that this vision actually exists and that we should march forward towards it. That's leadership. We don't have that in the Virgin Islands. We have people who are more concerned with being re-elected than moving the people forward. I'm here for one reason, to fix it. And that's the only reason. So Tregenza and I, we're going to be doing the things that put the Virgin Islands on a new course, on a course towards finally resolving some of these lifelong problems. And that starts with people.
All right. We're going to take a little break. We're going to circle back to a few of the topics that we spoke about. You're watching our News 2 election special sponsored by the Bryan Roach campaign. We'll be right back.
On the eve of this critical election, let us add clarity to what Albert and I mean by change course now.
It's a recognition that the Virgin Islands has been on the wrong path for far too long. It is a commitment to a purposeful government that actually produces results. It has nothing to do with delaying or stopping our recovery from the storms. We value the recent progress made by our disaster volunteers and the resources secured by our government to include the delegates to Congress and the members of the legislature.
Change course now is not just about this administration or an election. It is about not letting our government do the same thing over and over while expecting a different result.
That is why our neighbors from Frederickstead to Bordeaux and Coral Bay say that change just can't wait.
We will hold ourselves accountable to the people of the Virgin Islands.
Vote number 5 to change course now towards a brighter Virgin Islands for all of us.
Paid for by Bryan Roach for Governor and Lieutenant Governor.
Hi, this is Tregenza Roach. In these final days of the election, you may have heard false, desperate advertisements sponsored by our opponents that I have been against the betterment of my friends and family on St. Croix. As a senator, I have had to say no, along with my colleagues, when we believe the governor has abused his power or has made decisions that rob opportunities from hard-working residents. For example, I have said no to the governor appointing his brother as Port Authority Executive Director, cousin to the Port Authority Board, and sister-in-law to the WIYA Board instead of other more qualified Virgin Islanders. I have said no to purchasing executive limousines instead of buying new ambulances for our hospitals or first paving the roads in Frederickstead. I've said no to raising commissioners' salaries $10,000 to $20,000 higher while shortchanging deserving teachers at Ricardo Richards and police officers who patrol the streets in Christiansted. I did vote no on the Lime Tree Agreement because the governor forced us into a $40 million payday loan from a $1 billion company, pushed us to sell 300 acres of our precious Crucian soil at $10,000 an acre without an appraisal. And I said no to a deal that gave folks on St. Croix 17.5% less of refinery income than we were promised in the previous agreement. As leaders, we are measured not solely by our flowery words, but also our deeds and record as well. I proudly stand on my 3 terms as your senator over the Map Potter's new 90 days of busy work. On November 20th, the Bryan Roach team asked for your continued support and vote because change can't wait. Thank you. This is Tregenza Roach, your candidate for Lieutenant Governor on the Bryan Roach team. As a senator in the Virgin Islands legislature, I have been pleased to support many measures on behalf of the people of St. Croix. I voted yes to $100 million in Garvey bonds financing for road repair work, which the governor let sit from 2015. I voted yes to making St. Croix the sports capital of the Caribbean by providing $20 million in financing to create a state-of-the-art sports facility at the Paul Joseph Stadium. The governor has let it sit from 2014, and what is there now is a stadium in ruins, shrouded in dirt. I voted yes to $3.5 million to dredge the Schooner Bay Channel so that Gallows Bay could become a state-of-the-art facility and attract the small luxury liners. I voted yes to establishing the Bachelor of Nursing program at the University of the Virgin Islands so that St. Croix students would not have to travel to St. Thomas to complete their degrees. I voted yes to acquiring the property adjacent to Government House to create a proper governor's residence and to end the governor's wasteful spending of hundreds of thousands of dollars for accommodations at the Ritz-Carlton and private villas. I voted yes to constructing urgent care centers for the people of St. Croix in the absence of a proper hospital, and I voted yes to override the governor's veto of that legislation. Vote Bryan Roach, number 5 on your ballot, to end MAP's tyranny and to create a Virgin Islands for all of us.
Paid for by Bryan Roach for Governor and Lieutenant Governor.
Welcome back. You're watching our News 2 election special sponsored by the Bryan Roach campaign. Now earlier we had talked about quite a few topics, including clearing up some issues about this debate situation, the free tuition policy, as well as some of the things that the governor said he was afraid would happen if we installed a new administration. We also talked about GRS. Now you mentioned the Lime Tree deal earlier, Senator Roach. You voted no to the deal. Something that Governor Mapps said would bring back jobs to St. Croix, and that was his pitch. You know, he just wants this to operate so that he could bring back jobs and revive the St. Croix economy. Right. What are your ideas for